Hello and welcome to a unique episode of Weekly MTG. We're going to do something we've never done before, which is we are going to do an on-air live retrospective on a product. We do these all the time internally. We talk about what went right, what went wrong, what we learned, and what we can do in the future. And for you, we're going to do one live. And I have two fantastic guests with me, and we're going to introduce them in a moment to do this retrospective. Before we do that, one small piece of news. If you check out magic.gg today, we announced the lineup for the Command Fests for 2024. So we've got a bunch all around the world happening throughout the year. So head to magic.gg and see if there's a Command Fest coming to somewhere near you or not near you. Make a little trip out of it. I might do that. We'll see. But anyway, yeah, magic.gg, Command Fest 2024. Now let's introduce our two guests. We have two product architects with us today. We're going to talk about what that means in a moment. But we've got Max McCall and Zakeel Gordon here today. So welcome, gentlemen. Why don't you introduce yourselves real quick? Zakeel, I don't think you've been on the show before.
Yeah, I haven't. This is my first time. I'm Zakeel Gordon. I'm a product architect here at Tabletop Magic. I've been working here, I think, just over 3 years. I've had the opportunity to architect, I want to say probably a half dozen products or so. The Lost Caverns of Ixalan was my first tentpole set. DMR, RVR, Fallout that will be coming up here soon, and a couple other stuff in the future that's pretty exciting. So,
very cool. Max?
Yeah, I'm Max McCall. I was one of the product architects for March of the Machines, as well as several other sets, Doctor Who, Kamigawa, a bunch of stuff coming up, and so forth.
Yeah.
I think mostly March of the Machines is going to be relevant. We'll see how that goes.
Yeah, so that is the set we're talking about today. Specifically, we're talking about the Epilogue boosters for Aftermath. So before we get to that, so we said you two are product architects. Max, what is a product architect?
Yeah, so the product team is comprised of product architects who are responsible for Magic sets overall. So making sure that all of the many teams that are working on Magic sets are doing so in a way that is harmonious with what everyone else is doing. So not only just do the card mechanics like match what the world building team has come up with, but like also is the marketing team talking about the cool cards and the world building in the way that makes sense when you're opening packs. Does the packaging show all of that off to good effect? Does the booster fund riff off of the coolest cards in the set and things like that? Making sure that everyone has the opportunity to make their stuff shine without having to do all that coordination themselves. The coordination is our job.
Yeah. So we are going to have kind of a free-ranging conversation about Epilogue. So a note before we get going just on some terminology. So we're going to throw out a few things, and I just want to make sure we disambiguate them. So we're going to say Epilogue, and we're going to say Aftermath. Aftermath was a set that had Epilogue boosters. So you're going to hear us say Epilogue boosters a lot. That's a booster structure. That can be changed and updated for different sets. Aftermath is a specific implementation of that. We are also going to talk about Beyond boosters, which we've mentioned. Beyond boosters, similarly, that's the booster type for Assassin's Creed. So much like Aftermath had Epilogue boosters, Assassin's Creed has Beyond boosters. So you'll hear us talk a little bit about that. So when we talk about them in that way, that's the differentiation. Obviously, we'll talk about some sort of the specific implementations for Aftermath, but also Epilogue boosters overall. Okay, so let's start broadly with what was sort of the genesis of the idea for Epilogue boosters.
Yeah, so a lot of this came out of when we were talking about the lead up to March of the Machines internally. So we knew March of the Machines was going to be the capstone of the Phyrexian arc, where everybody from all over the multiverse gets together and defeats Elesh Norn. And then question mark? Like we knew after March of the Machine we were going into Throne of Eldraine, or Wilds of Eldraine, and the arc that we kick off with Kellen and so forth. But that, in some sense, that was kind of unsatisfying because we weren't going to be able to sort of pay off all of the character moments that we had been building up to across the Phyrexian arc. The idea of March of Machines: The Aftermath was like, let's tell literally an epilogue of the story of Aftermath. Of the story of the Phyrexian arc, so that we can see what happened to all of these worlds that got invaded, what happened to all of these characters, how they're dealing with things, and also one element of that, like the Chandra and Nissa have like in March of the Machine, the main set, Chandra and Nissa, because of the Phyrexianization, like don't get to have their moment. And March of the Machines was the opportunity for us to give them their moment. And that was really important too. So we made the epilogue boosters, which were constructed to give us an opportunity to tell those stories, be a space for people whom they're not as excited about the world of Magic shifting from set to set to set all the time. Give them a little extra moment with stories and build a product for them.
So how did that lead into the epilogue booster structure?
Yeah. So one of the things kind of about an epilogue is epilogues are short, right? So we knew that we weren't going to be able to build a full set out of all of these kind of little vignettes about all of these characters. And so we knew that we were going to have a much smaller size for this epilogue product set thing. And so that led to like, okay, well, one of the other things we know is that there are some people for whom drafting isn't a way they want to experience Magic necessarily, and lots of commons aren't pertinent to them because they don't care about draft, and so those cards kind of are meaningless. And so that we also thought was an opportunity, like, okay, we can make a product that it's a smaller booster that's not draftable, that only has these characters and story moments that aren't really suitable for commons anyway, and we can turn that into a set that people are going to like.
Okay, so I think we're having this retrospective. I think it's safe for us to say around Epilogue and Aftermath didn't quite land with fans. So talk a little bit about, first of all, what is, and maybe this is a question for Zakeel, what is sort of the process that the team goes through in retrospectives when taking in feedback from fans?
Yeah, I would say that we have a handful of different internal processes. So one of them is external facing to monitor sentiment, right? We are fans just as much as all of you are. We listen to podcasts, to YouTube videos, to all the Twitter comments and replies, whether a YouTube channel with 10 subscribers to 10 million subscribers. We genuinely do listen to all feedback. On top of that, of course, we are a business. We want to know how the product does with our retailers, with our distribution network. It means a lot to us to make sure that the products that we're releasing are exciting for stores, they're exciting for the WPN network. And then internally, we have creative goals to monitor how well, in terms of execution, that we did from a game design perspective, from world building and creative, and then from a product design, collation, et cetera, kind of perspective.
So the retrospective on Epilogue Aftermath, what are some of the things we learned?
Yeah, so the primary thing was people really would prefer to have packs that aren't quite so small, and in particular, packs that aren't as repetitive when you're opening them. Like, one of the things about Epilogue is you buy a full display of Epilogue, you get a full playset of all of the uncommons in the set. And when we were building it, we were like, that's plausibly a feature, right? You would like to have all of the cards when you buy the product. And the fact that all of those cards have booster fun versions, we thought meant that there was still sufficient variety in the pack, that opening them is still a fun experience, pack to pack, and so on and so forth. And it turned out that even with the booster fun, it's just still too much homogeny in the pack opening experience. You just get too many of the same cards over and over again.
So that's certainly something, and we saw it on the social media team as well. What went right about the product?
Yeah, I mean, people really like the cards.
Yeah.
All the cards themselves are all bangers. Chandra and Nissa getting to have their moment was something a lot of people were really excited about. but even just being able to have fan service for like the Kenriths and the funeral, seeing Karn and Ajani being able to kind of reflect in their circumstances. So like the cards themselves are fun. They're great to play with. People like them. The thing they didn't like was opening Aftermath packs themselves.
Which is kind of a barrier. To
Right. Of course. Yeah.
Were there any other lessons you all took from?
So I mean, a lot of it is what we learned got incorporated into the design of the Beyond boosters, which I think Zakeel is here to discuss. So why don't we get into that?
Yeah, so to set this up, so we're actually going to talk about 2 sets coming up that were affected by some of what we learned. So we're going to talk about Beyond boosters, and we are going to talk about OTJ as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, which also had an effect. So let's start with Beyond boosters. Why don't you talk a little bit about where Beyond boosters were in the production cycle when we started seeing this feedback, and then what we learned and how that changed things.
Yeah, so super high level, as a reminder, all of our production schedules and operational processes, making a Magic set takes a long time.
Years.
So it takes years, multiple
years,
years, 2+ years often, in which we are, one, of course, making sure that we can offer the best game design experience. We want to make cards that you all know and love and are powerful and exciting. We want to deliver on creative. We're often commissioning, literally hundreds of pieces of artwork for many of these sets. And the Beyond booster was something that we were already working on. It was done by a slightly different team with slightly different product goals, which we'll get into here in a second, but was mostly completed around the time of release in terms of the content distribution. So like we knew what we were building, we were confident in what we were making, but we still had enough time to tweak kind of the final product and how it was delivered to our fans as March of the Machine Aftermath was releasing.
Okay, so I think this is probably a good time. We have a graphic for the Beyond booster. So Zakeel, why don't you talk through what a Beyond booster looks like, and then sort of how those changes came into this?
Yeah, so super high level. Beyond boosters are a middle-sized product in our product ecosystem. So the goal of Beyond boosters, if you think of Magic kind of as a spectrum, on one side of our spectrum we will have a secret layer drop, which may be an opportunity for us to release between 5 to 10 cards. We can tell a story. I will use the Princess Bride drop, for example. I was the product designer on that.
Yep.
We were able to tell that entire story, over the course of one drop. And on the other side of that spectrum, we have something like the Lord of the Rings, Tales of Middle-earth, which is 350 plus new cards, plus commander decks, plus several different product features. And in the middle, what we were really trying to do is find an exciting product design that we can target towards 60-card formats that we know our audience will love, and just really execute on a new experience for fans while being able to tell an authentic Universes Beyond story, and create something that is compelling to the majority of our player base. So that leads us into Beyond boosters. Beyond boosters are 7-card modern legal packs. The total size of a Beyond booster set is about double that of an Epilogue set. So there's a total of 100 total cards in the set. You'll see there is a combination of uncommons. Again, there's no commons in the set. It's uncommon, rare, and mythic. There are uncommons. There is a non-foil land slot that can also drop a scene card. There is a dedicated rare and mythic slots, the traditional foil slot, booster fun slot. The experience and design goal of this project is to tell a story. So much of the uncommons in this set, to the point that Max was just making, is less so about having kind of signposts for limited and more about telling a story. So it's a combination of new cards that we can bring to life that represent Universes Beyond, and a smattering of reprints of evergreen staples that we know people will love.
Yeah. So. And one of the things I do want to point out, is I'm seeing a lot of chat in here about the makeup of these boosters, is it looks like you can have up to 4 rares or mythics in these packs, which is a change from Epilogue boosters.
Right.
Yeah. How many could you get in an Epilogue?
Up to 3.
Up to 3, and so you can have up to 4 in these Beyond boosters, which makes sense.
Correct.
And for those of you who want a little sneak peek at the future, yes, it mentions scene cards. There is a scene in the upcoming Beyond Booster release. Spoilers. Okay, so I'm also seeing a lot of questions about price. Totally understandable. That was one of the pieces of feedback we received on the Epilogue boosters as well. So here's the deal. We don't set MSRP, and so we can't get into specifics, unfortunately. But as they just mentioned, we did hear the price feedback, and is it correct? We took that into account as best as we could for a product that was already in production.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Unfortunately, we can't say more than that, and we're a little. We'd like to, but we can't. Okay, so now let's also talk about OTJ, because there was an Epilogue style booster in production there as well.
There was, yeah. So this is also slightly tricky without spoiling too much. Yeah, so Thunder Junction was constructed as a set to have an epilogue. We were really bullish on the idea of epilogues are a good way to include more story content about Magic in a format that doesn't necessarily have to be draftable. We were just putting the finishing touches on that when March of the Machines and the Aftermath released, and we realized that we ought to not do epilogue boosters in exactly the same way as we had done March of the Machines, which is what we had been planning to do. So what we did was we rolled the content of what was going to be the Thunder Junction epilogue, which is complicated to explain without all the rest of the context of that. But broadly, that content has been included into just regular Thunder Junction packs.
Okay.
So when you open Thunder Junction play boosters, you will have an opportunity to open cards from what would have been the Thunder Junction epilogue, but now those cards are just in the main set.
Okay, so we took what would have been an Epilogue booster and just put all those cards in the main set.
Yeah, a little stuff got left on the cutting room floor, but by and large, that content is its own separate card set within the OTJ boosters.
Okay, so talk a little bit more about kind of how you were able to make that pivot in where you were in the process for OTJ.
Yeah. So as Zakeel mentioned, we design sets years and years in advance. And so we were done with packaging and possibly all of the words that have to go on the packaging, as well as like we were in the middle of typesetting all of the cards themselves. That process is hideously complicated because different buckets of, basically, if a card has different frames or other stuff that affects like how we're going to foil it, it gets its own what we call a component, which is a group of cards within our database of like, as we're putting where the final words go on this card, do basically the same process for all the cards in this component. And crossing the streams on components and merging components into other components while the cards inside those components are being built is extremely tricky. The metaphor our production director used was, this is like trying to build a plane in midair while it's on fire and also falling out of the sky. So we, but you know, we were like we wanted to do that because, like, kind of to Zakeel's point, we want Magic to succeed. Like, nobody who works on Magic is like, oh, this is a game I don't really care about. Like, people have played Magic for years and years. They know what it's like to be part of a niche subculture. They really want Magic to succeed. Like, one of the tenets of the Tabletop Magic group is we are stewards of Magic. We want this game to be around for the years and years to come. We've been playing it. You know, I've been playing Magic for 25 years. We really want this to work. And so it was very, very challenging to make all of those pivots to Thunder Junction so that we could pull them into boosters, so that the boosters could be physically designed. Like the act of printing boosters itself is extremely complicated. Like one of the limiting factors of how complicated you can make a booster design is the physical size of the factory in which the boosters are built, because there might not be enough machines to fit on the production line. Like sometimes you run into the wall. So but so that's kind of how we, a lot of the context behind the challenges involved in bringing those cards into Thunder Junction play and collector boosters. But it is something we're able to do. It is something people are going to get to experience. We hope they're really excited about it.
Yeah, and I think the implementation is cool. We are going to, so part of the reason we're talking about these nuts and bolts here is because we are having first looks, which include card previews for OTJ, for Assassin's Creed, for Modern Horizons 3, and for Bloomburrow at MagicCon Chicago coming up on the 23rd. So we're going to do it live on stage as we've been doing it. I'm going to be there. And then we'll also post the video afterwards. So if you want to see how all of this is implemented, we'll learn more about that part of OTJ. I'm not even going to, it gives it away to say what the name is a little bit. So we'll learn more about it there. We're going to see a ton of really cool Assassin's Creed cards. I'm an Assassin's Creed fanboy, so I may fanboy out a little bit more over that set than others. But we'll get to all of that. So we do chat, have some time for some questions, obviously. We'll answer as many questions as we can, and we'll keep going while we're able to answer questions. It does help me just find your question if you tag @Magic well in chat. It'll help me spot things a little bit faster. We are going to keep questions to this topic. I know there was an earnings call this morning, and I've seen some questions already about it. I don't have any additional information in that space. But we can talk about this stuff. I do want to jump to a point I think we sort of touched on, but one of the pieces of feedback that Max mentioned for Epilogue boosters was the repetitiveness. But beyond boosters, the set is larger, correct?
Correct, yeah. So Beyond Booster Beyond Booster set construction size is 100 total cards compared to the 50 that were in Epilogue. Mm-hmm. There are 2 additional cards in the booster, but as you go through rarities, the duplication is going to be less, just based on kind of how the file is built and how that plays out. On top of that, one of the changes that we were able to make to Beyond Boosters, based on the feedback of Aftermath, was reducing the display size. So the display size for Beyond Boosters will be 24 count boxes instead of 30 or 36.
Yep.
This was, again, inspired to make sure that fans are happy with the purchase of a display. You can go to your local game store, buy a box with confidence, feel as though you're getting, just going to have a really good experience. And then also, on top of that, booster display, and then also make sure that the file itself takes more than, I'm so lost here. That I don't know, that you have a good time with the product and that you can buy it with confidence.
Yeah. Great. Let's see. Okay, we mentioned it earlier, but again, just to emphasize, Beyond Boosters will be modern legal.
Correct.
Yep. Here's a question, Max. I don't know. I don't even know how you answer this or if this is. But
great. I'm very excited.
Give it a shot. It says, why not do a rerun of Aftermath or add the cards somewhere on the list?
So it sounds like what this person is asking is basically, I would like the Aftermath cards to be more available, and how could we incorporate those into some other product?
Yeah.
I mean, so in general, the way we think about the list is we like the list to be a broad cross-section of cards from Magic's history because it drives home the sense of Magic cards could be anything when you could open any Magic card. And so putting all of the Epilogue cards onto the list together kind of doesn't play into that very much. We do occasionally do themed lists, but for that to make sense in an Epilogue context, it would almost have to be like we would have to have another war with the Phyrexians. So to the extent that we have Phyrexian War 2 Electric Boogaloo, actually an Epilogue list makes a lot of sense for that set. That set doesn't exist. It's a product of my own imagination in the last 10 seconds. But I mean, Epilogue packs are still available. You can get them from distributors if that's something you're interested in. We typically will make cards available for sale until about a little before 2 years after they've released. So if you want Epilogue cards, those are still readily available wherever, your local game store, Amazon, etc.
Here's an easy one for you. So does this mean, and it kind of plays off what you just said, does this mean that the list for OTJ will balloon back to the bigger size?
The list for OTJ is actually smaller than normal. Perhaps you could put 2 and 2 together, but I certainly couldn't say any more.
All right. Should we assume that non-Commander UB products are going straight to Modern from now on? You should assume nothing. I assume nothing of that sort. Again, beyond boosters, and maybe Zakeel, you can talk about this a little bit more as to the design of the product. Beyond boosters are meant to be a booster that feeds Modern. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, going back to that kind of spectrum that I talked about, if you look at the medium kind of size products that we do, one of them that we love and your fans love are Commander decks. So we've released several in the past, and we have Fallout coming up here. One of the design, both from a game design perspective and product design perspective, one of the things that we're not able to currently do is design for 60-card formats. So Beyond Boosters is really taking a shot at being able to design for traditional Magic. We love Commander, everyone loves Commander, but when we don't have to design around limited as a design restriction, you get fun mechanics and things that we couldn't typically do in a normal set.
Yep.
And then in addition to that, being able to tell the story of that IP, right? One of the most awesome experiences that people have when they open universes beyond products is just being able to experience that IP in a different way. So broadly, we have 2 kinds of universes beyond fans. One that loves to play within what we call the biodome, so the curated experience that we're making just with the cards that are available to them in that specific product. One of the other fans also just loves to sprinkle Magic cards throughout their existing experience. So a lot of the goals of Beyond Boosters as well are to provide evergreen staples that we know you can play in multiple different formats, just as a way to sprinkle your fandom and kind of bring joy to your Magic collection.
All right. Here's a layup. You can answer this, Max. Will the set code for these cards that would have been OTG Epilogue be the same as the main set?
They have their own expansion symbol.
Okay. All right. Let's see. When are we going to see teaser cards and...
One sec. I'm going to check.
Hi, Producer Sean.
Oh, no. Sorry.
Microphone adjustment. The mic volume be turned up.
Yes.
Producer Sean. I don't know if Producer Sean's ever been on camera before.
Once before.
That's Producer Sean, everyone. He makes this show happen. Thanks, Sean. Let's see. I want to try to keep things to this topic. I do see a bunch of good questions. So for anyone asking, I'm going to try to blanket answer a bunch of questions. For anyone asking for specifics about OTJ, about Assassin's Creed, about Bloomborough, about Modern Horizons 3, MagicCon Chicago, if you're going, great. Definitely come to the preview panel on Friday, the 23rd. If you're not, we are going to post that video as soon as it's ready. So we'll record the panel, we'll put it up. There's a ton of previews in that panel. I'm a little worried about us fitting it into an hour, but we're going to try. So we're going to have previews from all 4 of those sets. We're going to talk about the world. So, I saw questions about OTJ's story. We'll talk more about that there. Roy Graham is going to be on the panel, so he'll talk about the story, all that sort of stuff. So if there are specifics about those sets, we're going to talk about it there. I'm super excited about it. All right. So we did have, since we had some mic issues, can you repeat the answer about the set codes?
Yeah, OTJ. Sorry, those cards do have their own expansion symbol. Cards that would have been in OTJ's Epilogue but are now in the main set have their own expansion symbol. They're a separate group of cards.
Okay. Here's a good question. Will most story arcs going forward have quote unquote epilogue specific cards?
We aren't planning to do more epilogues to capstone sets in the way that we had done for March of the Machine and had been planning to do for Thunder Junction. We are always looking for more ways to incorporate more story into like Magic's broader ecosystem. We don't know exactly what form that's going to take, but like this is something we are passionate about doing. We know people like it, and it is something we're going to continue to try to deliver in the years to come.
Yeah. All right, I'm going to read this question. I'm going to say something, and then I'm going to let you guys jump on. All right, so I know Morrow said recently he understands epilogue sets were greatly disliked. Why is this product needed? So the first thing I want to say is we wrote an article years ago, and I think it was by Elaine Chase, if I'm remembering correctly, where it talked about sort of Magic's overall, and Rosewater said this a million times too, that Magic thrives on innovation, on trying new things. So, you know, I hope that what we're doing here today and what you're hearing is some of the thinking about why we tried something new.
Right.
And we learn from that, and then we shift and we try different things and we iterate on it. And so when someone asks like, why is this needed? Well, it's needed because maybe this specific product isn't needed, but it's needed in the sense that Magic's ecosystem needs innovation. And maybe you guys want to talk about how that plays into your job.
Yeah, I would say that there's a couple of things. Number one is we don't know. Take this back. There's a lot of fertile design opportunity that is otherwise not is going to like. Sorry, there's a lot of products that we've made that started off as speculative and started off as experimental that brought a lot of joy to people. So Jumpstart is a great example of a product that. Yeah. This is something we've never done. It would be considered a product that wasn't necessarily needed to a lot of people, but it is a product that people really, really love and has not only created just great memories, but is one that we regularly revisit annually.
Modern Horizons.
Modern Horizons as well is another product that opened a new design space that we otherwise really would have never had the opportunity to do. And as we continue to see what's possible, as we experience and work with different partners through Universes Beyond, and as Magic evolves, just at the play level and culturally and just within the ecosystem, there's just lots of things that we really want the opportunity to just try, again, make fun designs that will bring people joy, experience new creative expressions of a very familiar game, and just make awesome things.
Yeah. Like I can imagine some people hearing Zakeel thing like, oh, all of your innovation is going to be through like Universes Beyond. It's not. You know, we were trying to do innovation through Epilogue content because we wanted to do more with doing more things with Magic Story and integrating those more closely with card sets. Yeah. And that's what Epilogue was trying to do. That didn't work in the way that we'd hoped, but like I was saying a few minutes ago, we're going to keep trying to do that. We know that there are a lot of people whom the Magic Story is really important to them, and having it more closely tied to the cards that they're playing with is important, and that's something we want to try to pay off.
Yeah. Okay. I also don't want to give the impression that we're just throwing things at a wall and seeing what sticks.
That's true.
And I'm going to read a moderately aggressive comment, but I think the point and the question behind it is good. It says, do market research before you do the product, not after. We do, correct? You want to talk a little bit about how that works?
Yeah, so for every set, we do market research around the world we're thinking of building, how people react to the cards themselves, how people react to different things we might name the set, how folks react to different marketing messages, how folks react to in some cases, different price points and to different booster designs and so forth. We do a lot of research around this. So as I guess perhaps the Twitch chat itself can kind of show, like, Magic players contain multitudes of opinions. There were some people who were excited, very much so, about the idea of Epilogue boosters. There proved to be fewer of them than we hoped, and also other elements of the product design that we were talking about earlier kind of outweighed the benefits of that extra story content to those players. So, like, this isn't something we're just going off with some cockamamie idea, making it, and then just releasing it into the world and seeing how it works. That's not really a characterization I would agree with. We are always doing what we can to understand what people like and don't like about things we're thinking of making. The feedback we get from that is complicated. Occasionally we get that wrong, as in this case. Occasionally we get it right. You know, Zakeel was talking about Jumpstart and Modern Horizons. And, you know, we do a lot of innovative things. The idea is you see them and you don't even think they're innovative in the sense of, like, of course they've done this. They should have been doing it for years, and it just seems very natural. And so it's really when we fall on our faces that we have conversations like this more about, hey, how did this happen? What can we do to make sure it doesn't happen again?
Yeah. I had a question. Where'd it go? Okay, here we are. You mentioned that putting previous epilogue cards in the list doesn't match with the list's philosophy. Is there anything preventing you from innovating the list to serve a more story-centric purpose as opposed to historic purpose it's attempting to serve now?
There isn't. And at Chicago, as Blake was saying, I think folks who do want more story content integrated with the list are going to be very satisfied with Thunder Junction.
Yeah. I think so too. That's really cool. Let's see. Just someone saying I personally love the special guests innovation. I do too.
Oh yeah,
Right,
I didn't
yeah,
even think of
so,
that.
Do you want to talk about special guests? We've had a few comments about them.
Yeah, special guests were so special guests were another form of product innovation that has bode to be very successful. People like them. It's a way that we're able to get awesome and exciting reprints into standard sets that occur kind of naturally as people are playing. With MKM, special guests now also drop in play boosters, so you can open some and play them in limited, which is pretty exciting and fun. And yeah, I mean, more than anything, that is a prime example of we have a concept that we think is going to be really awesome. As that concept comes out and goes into the world, we'll tune it just based on the feedback that we have. The way that the special guest program was implemented with LCI and into MKM is slightly different. Rarities versus content sizing and et cetera, and we'll just take the feedback as it goes into the real world and try to make it the best product feature that it can be.
Yeah, and adjacent to special guests is the list, and I've actually had a blast with the list in MKM, drafting those cards, which has been weird. Like my very first draft, I won a match by decking myself with Jace, Wielder of Mysteries. Like not in the set, but it worked out.
Just like we drew it up.
Just like we drew it up. But that sort of variety has been a feature for me, at least. So. All right, let's see. Okay, so there have also been a number of questions since we talked about Epilogue as a way to show the rest of that story. There have been questions about, well, why not go back to blocks? Why not expand that story? Why jump into Wilds of Eldraine and instead have a whole Aftermath set?
Yeah, I mean, this kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier about Magic players containing multitudes of opinions. There are some folks who are really excited, who get really excited about a particular world and just want to spend more time on that world. They want a sequel to March of the Machine. They want a sequel to Kamigawa Neon Dynasty. Like, they just want more of the world that they got really excited about. The biggest challenge with that is, like, for one of the pieces of market research we do is what people's favorite worlds are. The most favorite world typically only has a share of like between 10 and 14%. It's like it's only the most favorite plane for like 1/7 of Magic players. And so that extra set on that world is serving at most 1/7 of the Magic audience. And we want every set to be for everybody. And so that's why we're going from world to world. And the way that we're trying to pay off the needs of those people for whom whatever their favorite world was is by doing stuff with things like Epilogue and doing more to try to find more ways to augment your favorite world in such a way that that doesn't supplant the next set we wanted to make. Because we also don't want to be releasing set upon set upon set upon set.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, there are a lot of people asking for blocks back. I played during that era, which was quite the long era, and I think there's some rose-colored glasses. We got tired of some of these worlds by the third set. Often.
It's true. Yes.
Yeah.
I guess at this point, I don't know if the median Magic player is from the post-block era, but certainly a lot of them were. And certainly for people who haven't been playing since the 90s, some of those second and third sets were pretty rough, right? Everyone's favorite mechanic typically goes into the first set. All of the coolest card designs that pay off the best tropes about that world go into the first set. By the time you get to a set like the third one in the block, it's starting to look pretty iffy.
Yeah.
Or was sometimes.
I'm not going to throw any shade. I'm going to throw a little bit of shade. But there are people in the building who worked on the set. But I think, for example, Ravnica, beloved plane, beloved world. Dragon's Maze, not a great set.
Yep.
And I think that's sort of the thing that gets lost a little bit I think there are probably more third sets in the block era that were, or second or third sets that were mediocre to not great than there were really good ones.
Yeah.
And
that actually goes back to Dragon's Maze in particular is a good example of some of the work that Zakeel and I are doing as product architecture, making sure everything fits together. Dragon's Maze famously is a set that doesn't contain dragons. The reason it's named Dragon's Maze and doesn't contain a dragon is because nobody told the lead designer that the set was named Dragon's Maze. He is still bitter about that.
Reasonably.
Yeah.
Yep. All right, let's see. Here's an interesting sort of meta question for product design. Do you think you're still in the middle of getting and experimenting on that product design, or can you sense that most of the products now are staying like they are for the foreseeable future?
I would say the anchor and kind of fundamentals of what we do are pretty straightforward. The vast majority of the sets that we release are ones that fans can expect and ones that we know in which we're delivering on. So this is not final numbers, but I would say like 90 to 95% of what we make is pretty straightforward, repeated. And I would say 5 to 10% of it is like, how can we just push the envelope further? What new features can we bring? What can we do that'll make people excited? And I think if you get into a world where 100% of what you do is the same thing over and over and over again, not only do you just miss out on the opportunity cost of trying something new and delivering on something that we don't even know, at this point in time, but to that point about kind of block structure, you run into kind of repeated mistakes because you don't want to change your process.
Yeah.
So like remaining flexible, having an eye for innovation and just new changes is always just going to be beneficial in any product development kind of environment.
Yep. Here's a nice question. Do you prefer to work on Magic-related IP or UB IP?
Depends on the IP usually. Zakeel has some favorites.
Yeah, I think it's both. I love the Lost Caverns of Ixalan, not just because it's my set, but just I love the plane. We were able to deliver on, revisit the plane in a way that felt new and special. I also was the product architect of Fallout and Assassin's Creed. I also loved Fallout. I grew up playing those games. When that product assignment kind of put on the whiteboard, I'm like, me right here. Like I know exactly what this is. So I think they're just. Is it eggs and steak? Is that like a great analogy? They complement each other. They're slightly different tastes, different feelings, slightly different skill sets, but they're really 1A and 1B. I don't have a preference between them both.
Okay. Here's a question that gets to something Zakeel was talking about earlier, which is sort of the different types and scopes of UB products. So the question is, wouldn't Aftermath work better as a Commander product? Do you want to talk again about, because you talked about from Secret Lair all the way up to Lord of the Rings style release?
Yeah, and I would be interested to hear what Max says about this. I think one of the things that often kind of gets lost in Commander decks, at least from our side, is one, Commander decks deliver on one very specific experience. It's an amazing experience. It's one that we regularly do and people love. But we also want to make sure that we're making cards for people to play in other formats, right? In the case of Aftermath, how do we have cards that are exciting in Standard, Pioneer, Modern, and even potentially, I hope, in kind of older formats as well? We are just conscious of both designing products that we know will be exciting for Commander, because Commander also is a catch-all format. Every card that we printed ends up being legal there, and both in Commander, Legacy, and Vintage. But also having cards that can potentially impact different strategies within a Standard metagame or a Pioneer metagame.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with all of that, but and even further, like one of the challenges with Commander, like using Commander as the vehicle for specifically the Aftermath, is that Aftermath is trying to tie up the loose ends of many, many different stories, and a Commander deck kind of only serves to pay off really like one story. Like you have the Commander, and then probably all the cards in the deck should like nod to or point at that Commander in some way. And it becomes challenging to make all of the references we want to make to what happened on Amonkhet, what happened on Dominaria, what happened with New Phyrexia and Zalfir, what happened with Karn and Ajani and Nissa and Chandra. Tying all of that together in a holistic way for a Commander deck is going to be really, really challenging.
Let's see. So you're not card designers, but maybe you can speak to this in some of the conversations you've had. So speaking about Aftermath, the cards weren't exciting in Standard, though. They didn't impact the format at all. Can you speak to that?
So in general, the way we design cards is we're not overly prescriptive about this card is the chosen card. It's going to go into Standard. It's going to be the most powerful card in the format. We make lots of cards, and then we send them out into the universe, and then people do what they will with them. And the reason for that is if we get overly prescriptive about which card should be strong, very quickly we start making cards that are way too strong. It's important to have a floor for cards that's low enough that we release some cards. They prove not to be as powerful as we thought they might be. That's good because that prevents us from releasing too many cards. So with with Aftermath, that one of the complexities of that also is Aftermath is the 8th set in Standard, and so it's mostly augmenting Standard decks that already exist, we think, at the time we're building March of the Machines. And so we kind of ran into an intersection of we don't really want to shoot super high on cards generally, and we thought some cards were going to be, like we thought some decks were stronger than they were and made stuff to augment that. And then to Zakeel's point, we also want to make sure we're paying off the Commander audience and people who play other formats. And so there aren't a lot of like Standard all-stars in Aftermath. That speaks to like the way we design products more generally, and again in a way I think that is good and healthy and prevents us from having to go back and deal with a constant level of power creep.
All right. This is a good question that I think lets us talk about another part of the process that we haven't addressed yet. So how can you tell if sets sell because of their setting IP or because of how fun and powerful the cards are? I do not envy your data analysts, to be honest. We don't either. They're very good at their jobs, but there's both some art and some science into this. So maybe talk about, we talked about the market research we do before. Why don't you talk a little bit about the market research we do after? Yeah,
so we have an entire data analyst product insights team that does retrospectives on each set. Much of that data is pulled from all of you online, as well as our retailers through the WPN network, as well as kind of the distributors, kind of everything through the chain provides feedback that we're able to look at. And to that exact point, right? Many people are reacting to, many people have different priorities and preferences. So sometimes people really love the reprint in a set. Like their major thing is, oh, that card had the reprint that I really was excited about. That's the metric for success. Some other folks are primarily interested in limited. Was the limited environment and an A+ banger, or was it slightly lower than what I wanted? Collectability, and there's kind of half a dozen different vectors that we look at. some of that is pretty in the weeds. But yeah, we have an entire product insights kind of research team that does all that work.
Yeah, I mean, for card designs, like cards that are beloved, even though they prove to be pretty weak, is a pretty good indicator of like, this is the kind of thing people think is fun. This is like, we should be looking to make more riffs on these cards in the future, probably.
Yeah.
Tying the world building into that is where the art comes in the sense of like, oh, one of the reasons maybe this card is really charming is because it's like the purest interpretation of maybe what a cat mobster on New Capenna should be.
Yeah.
And it's not possible to make that card without New Capenna. And it's analysis like that there ends up being a lot of kind of like hand-curated information around what people liked and why. Because it's like people like the cards, people play with the cards that are strong. They don't always like the cards that are strong. And when cards are too strong, maybe they like them less because of the ubiquity. Yeah. And so what we're really doing is like trying to find stuff that people were excited about orthogonal to its power level.
So, Chad, I'm going to give you a little challenge real quick. We're going to see if they can guess, because I just happened to have been going through the Wilds of Eldraine post-set analysis the other day. Chat, tell me what was the top card rated in the set. I'm very interested. And I'm going to ask, I don't know if you guys remember off the top of your head. We'll give Chat a second to see if they can come up with the answer. But we'll see if people can guess the top-rated card in Wilds of Eldraine. Let's see. A lot of things coming through.
This is just Wilds of Eldraine, not
just Wilds of Eldraine.
Bonus sheet.
Not the bonus sheet. Yeah, the bonus sheet had a separate thing. Okay, so, all right. I've seen a couple people get it right, and a couple people get some cards that were in like the top 5, top 10. Okay, so Regal Bunnycorn getting a lot of votes. Was in the top something. It was in the top something.
That was my guess.
Yep. Agatha's Soul Cauldron was near the top. I want to say it was in the top 3.
Is it the Goose Hydra?
It's not the Goose Hydra. Goose Hydra was high up there. What do you think it was?
I thought it was Bunnycorn.
It was not Bunnycorn. Bunnycorn was high up there.
For the record, Wilds of Eldraine is neither Zakeel or mine. So.
Yes.
Yeah. It was Sir Ginger.
Of course. How could it not
that
be?
makes sense.
It was Sir Ginger. But again, to the point that you all were making, Sir Ginger is not a standard powerhouse. It's not a powerhouse in any 60-card format. But it's got a lovely story. It reads powerfully. It's a really cool card. And so I think, when we're talking about power level, that's something that people have to keep in mind, is that people's favorite cards are not necessarily the most powerful.
Geez, my favorite card is Strip Mine.
Yeah. All right. We're going to end on that note because it was kind of fun. So thank you, everyone, for tuning in for this, the first show of this kind. I hope we get to do more of these. I love sharing with you all some of the thought process. We have some really smart people who work for us. And Matt and Zakeel are just 2 of them. And so
I think smart, too.
Yeah. So I hope you at least see some of the thought process behind it, some of where we're going, how we innovate, how we're moving forward. Let's go through what's coming up. So next week, for those of you asking about Fallout, I know a lot of people are excited about Fallout. So next week, same bat time, same bat channel, we are going to be doing Fallout right here on WeeklyMTG. We're going to be talking about Fallout debut. Fallout previews are going to be next Tuesday through Friday, culminating in a panel at MagicCon Chicago, where we will unveil the final deck. Well, not unveil. We've already talked about the topics, but we'll show off a ton of cards from the final deck at MagicCon Chicago. That panel will, of course, be posted as well. And then immediately before the Fallout panel at MagicCon Chicago, we are going to have the preview panel, where, as I said earlier, we are going to have first looks for a whopping 4 sets. We're going to be talking Outlaws of Thunder Junction, Modern Horizon 3, Assassin's Creed, and Bloomburrow. All of those happening at MagicCon Chicago. WeeklyMTG will be off the week after that because producer Sean and I will be traveling. But yeah, lots of great stuff coming up. Thank you, Max and Zakeel, for coming in and sharing some of your insights. Thank you all for tuning in and asking some great questions, and we'll see you next week.